A man accused of killing his own stepfather appeared in court this morning.
The hearing for James Bradburn had been delayed multiple times. Attorneys wanted to have his mental health evaluated. WKYT's Lucy Bryson was at today's hearing, and she has updates on the case.
James Bradburn, a Lexington man accused of killing his own stepfather, was seen in court Monday morning after multiple delayed hearings. Last month, police found James Bradburn barricaded in the home that he and his 80-year-old stepfather, Arliss Stewart, lived in together. His arrest citation says he shot a hole into the floor of their home and then shot Stewart after a struggle. Toward the end of September, he was seen in court last. That's where Judge Denotra Gunther referred him to New Vista, a mental health facility in Fayette County. This delayed his preliminary hearing, per the request of Bradburn's attorney. His attorney claimed that Bradburn was dealing with mental health issues at the time. He was next seen at a private hearing in early October. When he was seen Monday morning, Judge Gunther shared that after further review of the report of his time at New Vista, Bradburn would be referred to another facility in Lexington. The case was then waived to the grand jury without a hearing. He had a handful of what seemed to be his loved ones in attendance. When we approached them for an interview, they denied any comment. The court determined that he would be sent to the Kentucky Correctional Psychiatric Center for further assessment of his mental state. In Lexington, Lucy Bryson, WKYT.
Bradburn was also facing charges of stalking Stewart back in 1997. Those charges were eventually dismissed.